Warning, the material about to be exposed to is foreign to the minds of individuals who are limited in their capacity to understand the actual reality of power around them, just as you and everyone else alive currently are. What you're about to hear are opinions, suppositions, ungospel, or scientific proofs, not infallible certainties. Brace yourself for incoming opinions that could confirm or deny your preferential view of the reality of power. Brace yourself for fallible material, fallible opinions, and values reflected, but nonetheless variably firmly held. We do not apologize to anyone. We do not apologize for daring to express our views and impressions of what we believe is and what we hope to see. We will keep talking so long as we are able.
And now, Frico attempts to talk about the news without freaking out.
That's the plan, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, I didn't hit the transition button there. That's the plan, ladies and gentlemen. The plan is not to freak out, to move that from 2 shows since last freak out to 3. As I set upon the goal of beating the world record of 21 shows in a row without a freak out. This is coming off of 3 shows in a row with freakouts. So, that's the goal today. That's what we have planned. Before we begin, though, I'm going to do a little bit different thing here. I'm going to have to create another scene here, which I'll do after the show. So I got the headlines image up here, and I don't really want that because I'm going to have to... don't worry. I'll fix this for tomorrow's show. You guys don't even know what I'm talking about. I want to talk about the latest top links. These are the stories that, if you see them here in latest top links, most likely they won't end up showing up in the show. Philly Police Inspector Joseph Bologna applauded by fellow officers as he surrenders on charges of assaulting a protester. Senate bill seeks to create National Police Misconduct Database. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot in expletive-filled fight with aldermen over Black Lives Matter riots. New York Times editorial page editor resigns amid backlash over Cotton send in the troops op-ed. A 1,000,000-mile battery from China could power your electric car. China Telecom Unicom urges FCC not to halt U.S. service. Artificial neurons show computers could be way more efficient. And finally, a dual mechanism antibiotic kills gram-negative bacteria and avoids drug resistance. Those are the stories that, as they come through and circulate, they didn't make the cut, but they're worthy of noting. But they're not going to be on the show because there's only 4 stories a show. So it's only the, subjectively speaking, best of the best that make it on the Frico Talks the News. Well, the best of the best is basically the stories that fit into what I could put together to call a news art. So we're going to get to the title of our show today, and right here it is. The name of our news art today is Breaking Up is a Shock to the Pattern, and this is for Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Frico Talks the News. I'm Frico with Frico.com. On this episode, breaking up the Google ad monopoly, ag-styled. The anatomy of patterns in predicting evolution. Amazon power triggers Musk call for breakup. And finally, the dialect of the news poem today is titled, A Shock is All It Takes to Make Rats Love What Their Bodies Naturally Hate. And the topics that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be talking about State Attorneys General Google, antitrust Google, evolution, complexity, evolutionary theory, Elon Musk, Amazon, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Amazon censorship, and this is a really good one, amygdala and amygdala excitation, and Kent Berridge. These are the things that you're going to talk about today on today's show. Don't forget to get your daily Frico updates at Frico.com/daily. Just enter your email address and register for daily updates today. Now let's get ready. I'm gonna back this out and back this in. There we go. Here we go. All right. Let me do it this way then. I want to hold on one second here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new to the show, the live stream, during the live stream, what I do with the live stream is I'm actually recording segments. All right. So the first segment I'm going to record now, I'm getting ready to record, is a talk headline. So I'm going to get it prepped here, and I'm going to start recording in 3, 2, 1. This is the talk headlines for Frico Talks the News on Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Today's top headline, Breaking Up the Google Ad Money, Ag Style. This is Google Attorney General, State Attorneys General Google, antitrust Google, Google Ad Market Monopoly. States' attorney generals are preparing to go after the monopoly that is Google, and the monopoly they're targeting is Google Ad Market Monopoly. That's right. The Google Ad Market Monopoly. That's what they're targeting. It's not exactly a monopoly. It's a near monopoly. It's got some competition from Facebook and Twitter. But on the main, those 3 are the dominant players in the ad market. Here's an excerpt from technologytimes.pk. States are leaning towards a push to break up Google ad tech. Well, I missed this part, business. But you see it there, so you're probably like, dude. What do you guys think of the new look? I changed the look of the site. And basically, I changed the look of the site to, I think, look better in the show and to make it easier to read and a little bit. I think it's cooler looking. Y'all let me know. Comment down below if that's true. Once the attorneys general file their expected lawsuit, they have a number of tools at their disposal to signal their intent to push for a breakup of Google's ad technology business. The state attorneys general investigating breakup. Oh my, what is this sentence? Hold on. We can get through this together, team. Come on, team. Let's rally around the words. The state attorneys general investigating. Okay, I still don't get it. Investigating breakup Google. I did not write this, by the way. Investigating breakup Google. I think okay. Maybe it's supposed to be. Okay, now I get it, I think. Investigating breaking up Google for potential antitrust violations are leaning toward pushing for a breakup of its ad technology business as part of an expected suit. People familiar with the situation told CNBC. By the way, I ain't sweating them that. I could easily. That's a mistake that I regularly make, so leaving out that. It's one of those mistakes that the little red line doesn't appear for all the time, or the little blue line doesn't always appear for when you do your checks. So this is one of those easy mistakes to make. I know it's my editorial mind. I just want to give some people some cover. It's okay. It's okay. All right, back to the story. 50 attorneys general have been probing Google's business practices for months, alongside a similar probe being led by the U.S. Department of Justice. Both the states and the DOJ are looking to file a suit against the internet giant as soon as within the next few months, the people told CNBC. I don't know how I'm going to be able to express this, if I'm going to be able to express this, and this might fail, so I apologize in advance if this little rant goes nowhere. You see the labels like state and DOJ. Really, if there was a way that we knew, it's not all the states, some states. Which states? And then once you get to which states, okay, which families? That's always, to me, if I don't know the answers to these things. It's, but essentially, which families? Every state is like a little fiefdom. It has to give tribute to the higher citadelians, but they have their own citadelian classes. So that's what you would want to know. And you would find, I think, by and large, that the states in which the citadelians in power benefit from the tech fascism that we now have in America today, they will tend to support Facebook and Google. And the families whose businesses, loosely speaking, are actually getting hurt by this, they'll tend to... So that's what it's really coming down to. The Facebook and Google are eating into the profits, not just of the middleman, the small business, the middle business, the small business. Now they're starting to eat into citadelian power. So citadelians are competing. This is what you're really seeing. This is a competition between citadelians with competing interests. And that's why the states are pushing back. The states that are pushing back are, this is Freako theory, okay? This isn't conspiracy. I don't have the documents. You take it for what it's worth. But I have reason to believe that a lot of my theories that I've plenty of theories that I've had that turn out to be not true, sometimes a minute after I said them. But I have a pretty good track record with the line of thought that this theory is coming from. As I've seen things develop, things have largely been happening as I've kind of seen them happening. I couldn't predict a virus per se, but the virus accelerated, tremendously accelerated, but it accelerated what I saw in my head. Not in particular details, but on the main. So this is why I have reason to think that maybe I'm more right than not. That this is really, all you have to do is study the states, and I don't have the bandwidth, the time, the effort to do this. I would have to dedicate probably at least 15, 20 hours a week to come anywhere close to figuring this out within the next probably 3 months. That's the kind of research that it would require to figure out what I'm talking about. Which families have the power across the land in the state that we're talking about? So there are, I mean, it's like a Russian nesting egg as far as the citadelian dolls are concerned. You have the first available citadelian, such as we would think of it, or I would think of it. The local citadelians are the tiniest little nesting egg inside the giant citadelian that they sit inside. And that's the only real citadelian that matters. But because their citadelian power derives from that, they're really not citadelians. They're just They're just vassals, and some of the most vassals are vassals without land. Some vassals are, essentially we have, in de facto manner, we have a fiefdom system largely in America today. And most of human history, by and large, is some form of fiefdomage on the main. It's a concentration of these folks that either they come from a legacy of those who were willing to kill faster and better than their neighbors, and they did it first, and they got to the gates first, so to speak. Whatever the fundamental gates of that society are, whether the gate is, in our case, whether the gate is newspaper gate, or whether the gate is discovering electricity and using in a useful way and owning the copyright on that electricity so you can build a multi-million empire gate, electricity gate, all the different gates. The places where if you put yourself there, you can easily shut that gate behind you and assure that nobody comes on the other side of where you're at. And you can just continue to build up your wealth, your influence, your power, to use your mind to decide the fate of hundreds of millions of human beings, and to do so with no accountability. Well, with diminishing accountability as you concentrate your reserves. And what's happening here is because Google and Facebook have concentrated so much wealth and influence and power, they are now influencing citadelians who didn't get in on the game early enough. I will say probably largely the more legacy citadelians who felt a little bit more secure in their universe didn't feel the impetus to go out into this dangerous field of social media and the interwebs in general. I mean, everybody's in the interwebs now. Everybody's in the interwebs. But if those families didn't invest heavily early on, and some families did, and the families that did like things the way they're going, and the families that didn't, well, they have a vested interest in taking down the social media empires that have been built. That's how I would encourage you to look at this, and not look for the right and the wrong and the legal and the constitutional, but the reality of power of the circumstance that you're seeing unfolding and what it tells you, or what I believe what it tells you. If I use my Action Batsa methodology of analyzing the reality of power, which is fundamentally trying to understand preference, the self-serving interests in the equation, and where the fundamental power for decision making is. And that fundamental power is absolutely with the citadelians. And now I'm not going to get into all my analyses right now for this particular segment about how I came to that conclusion necessarily, that this is, well, essentially actually I did kind of spell it out for you. The bottom line is there are citadelians, just human nature tells me there would be, in any situation, there are early explorers and there are Johnny-come-latelys, and the Johnny-come-latelys are the ones that are trying to get some back. That's my supposition. It's based upon a supposition that the fundamental driver for the citadelian is to strive the land in supreme power, to be the one that has the precedent of all precedent, the goldest of the gold, the most senators, the presidents, whatever. That's the goal of the citadelian. And when you begin to impede their ability to do that, even if you're a citadelian, then that's when citadelians, they go to war. And this is I believe fundamentally what you're seeing here. Anybody that really wants the government to come up with a quote-unquote just solution is kidding themselves. The only just solution is the one that they can get away with. that in the end serves the best interest of the individuals who were successful in manipulating the handful of individuals you have to manipulate in this country to convert the whole universe around us into something radically different. That's the world we live in now. That's what we're dealing with. So I'll just continue here with what they have to say, which I don't think is as important as what I just told you, because all of this is there's some degree of truth to propaganda, and there's some degree of truth to fake wrestling, for instance. There is some athletic skill and strategy, and there is realness to fake wrestling. So there is realness to fake news. If you just have to train yourself to begin to look at news not on its face, but look more at what it tells you about the individual that wrote it and the institution that allowed this particular take on the news to represent its brand. Those are much more important questions. The attorneys general investigating Google, which is owned by Alphabet, haven't yet definitively ruled out pushing for alternatives for its ad technology business, like imposing restrictions on how it runs its business, one of the sources said. The suit may also include a push for both that option and breaking up the ad tech business. Should the attorneys general aggressively pursue a breakup Google ad technology business, I think they meant pursue breaking up Google ad technology business. It would be notable. While regulatory enforcement agencies have recently favored structural remedies, breakups and divestitures, regulators have less onerous solutions available, like barring certain behaviors through a consent decree. One of the attorneys general, I hate that. I can't just say attorney generals and let's just make it that. Let's just get rid of this artifice and not do this. Attorneys general? No, I refuse. Actually, I'll continue because I'm a conformist. Y'all listen to the show. Y'all know that's true. That was one of those, never mind. That was stupid. Lame 90s comedy that I'm dropping on you guys. One of the attorneys general filed their expected lawsuit. They have a number of tools at their disposal to signal their intent to push for a breakup of Google's ad technology business. That includes what they allege, the evidence they introduce, pre-trial briefings, and news conferences. I tell you, one of the most powerful tools that these folks have as far as trying to work out. Ultimately, the Citadelians will want to work out a compromise. They will not, in the end, want to break up Google and Facebook. Well, some Citadelians. I think on the main, that's not likely to happen. And I think the reason is that I think Google and Facebook and whatnots, they are going to be willing and able to make deals and kind of bring this whole Citadelian group back together again, which would be bad for us, by the way. It's much better for us when Citadelians are at war with one another, and they have to measure how they deal with us poors. But when they're together, that's a little bit more dangerous for us poors. Some of the places that I get my stories from is newsalike.com, which is one of the news aggregate link sites that I personally run and curate. So if you go to newsalike.com, you'll read, FCC declares TV ownership rules don't apply to ATSC's 3.0 broadband internet. And I don't know much about this, but I am definitely going to be looking into this. And if this is something more interesting, this is highly likely to show up in next week's shows. Supreme Court affirms bad patents exist, saves review process. Amazon, Facebook, and Google turned to deep network of political allies to battle back antitrust probes. Cops canceled after 33 seasons amidst protest and police violence. I have so much to say about that. Amazon asked PA justices to axe workers' post-shift OT suit. And finally, non-paying, promise-breaking Germany learns of troops pullout. Yeah, that's some interesting links there, some of which you might see next week. You never know. You never know. I love what I do, by the way, with Freako.com, or Freako Talks the News. This is a show which, on the main, You won't get breaking news or latest news, current news, but not latest news. Because on Frico Talks the News, what I like to do is I like to mull over stories, and I circulate them through this process where some of them immediately I know I don't want to talk about it, but I work my stories through a process where I see them multiple times, and I get to think about them more and germinate. And most of these stories that I read on here hardly ever have I not been thinking about it at least for 3 or 4 days, sometimes a week. So that's the way it works on Frico Talks the News. So when I read these links here, pay attention, because some of these stories you'll see in the following week. Sometimes you'll see them sooner. Sometimes I make changes when there's something I urgently think I need to cover. But on the main, this is a reflective. It's a news art show. It's not a headline news show. And with that, don't forget to tip your Frico at frico.com/tips, or you can go to frico.com and just click the yellow button. It'll take you to a PayPal thing, and then you send Frico money, and that's how it works. Alrighty. Let's get set for the next segment here. Let me turn this mic for a second. I gotta clear my throat. It's a coffee day. I got my coffee cup here, so you don't see the sponsor, the unofficial sponsor, Hello Kitty, the Hello Kitty water cup. If you watch the show regularly, you know Hello Kitty regularly appears. Hello Kitty was on yesterday's show, but not today because it's a coffee day. That's just the way it is, ladies and gentlemen. Just the way it is. Let's get ready to record our next segment in 3, 2, 1. This is the Dialectical for Frico Talks the News on Thursday, June 11th, 2020. My name is Frico with Frico.com. And our Dialectical today, the anatomy of patterns in predicting evolution. Evolution complexity, evolutionary theory, theory of evolution, and evolutionary science. That's what we're going to be talking about. And so much more. So much more. Okay. Patterns. Potentials. Understanding the impersonal nature of patterns and the framework of potential that patterns, in and of themselves, contain is key, in my opinion, to understanding the reality of the world around you, such as any of us are capable of coming anywhere close to understanding. It is incredibly difficult for us to remove constructs into patterns. Patterns are given meaning and expression and form, even animus, even agency, merely for the assumption of the underlying craft of existentiality frozen in forms that are inherently assumed to be, at the very least, epoch spanning in terms of the time such patterns can consume. For the individual reading the flow, the epoch spanning becomes so much more, fulfilling the drive towards the apex existential, which is my term, and it's essentially the drive towards experiencing peak existentiality in the here and now, which includes a perception of what I call is, was, and always will be, the sense of the timeless victory in the here and now against all external limitations. And this core preference within to find and live in such epoch-spanning structures as patterns imbued with intention, with design, with agency, with spirit. I meant to write is to find. I missed an is there. This core preference within is to find and live in such epoch-spanning structures as patterns imbued with intention, with design, with agency, with spirit. Cognitive behavioral science as a discipline is just now beginning to scratch the surface of all the ways that our minds equip spiritual force, moralistic force, logical force into the patterns we find. And you can replace the word force with ideational construct. Spiritual force, spiritual ideational construct, moralistic ideational constructs, logical ideational constructs into the patterns we find. The mind, we are discovering, is capable of creating realities from scraps of memory, of even creating or altering memory beyond your self-aware state. In other words, we know the mind lies to us about the real patterns that exist, but it gets worse, my friend. For the mind not only restructures reality through memory alteration without your consent, it also finds patterns where no patterns exist. The classic example is the one in which individuals, again and again, experience a preference that every time they do A, B happens. Of course, sometimes their perception is accurate, but more often than not, the assumption is formed around the brain's selective recall of the pattern you are seeking to find. A produces B. You know what? I tell you, every time I say I'm going to have a good day, I lose my keys. Every freaking time. Maybe it happened 3 times. 3 times out of the 300 times that you've said that. But all you remember is the 3 times, the other non-eventful times. And your brain wanted to find that pattern because you told it you wanted to find that pattern. And it was easy for it to find that and not recall all the rest. What it finds are the jarrings, the shakeups, not the uneventuals that mostly fill this exchange. So what you produce is a memory of the 3 out of 20 times that A produced B, and made that 20 out of 20 times in your head, because the 17 were uneventful. And their discovery as a counter memory to the pattern you wanted to find would have defeated the mind's seeking after that sugar at the end that comes from feeling good about your narrative clearly being true. That's what your body does. Your body sends you the little whatever, if it's just one thing or multiplicities of things that give you yeah. I got another story later on about that too. See, this whole show is going to tie together. That's why it's a news art. Well, in part. Patterns. These define the forms of the living, the dead, and the in-betweens, the unthought and the ones with high agency, the inanimate and the organic. All forms. Patterns are the potential and the come from. The descendants and the potential foundational scaffolding for all the variations, complexities, paths such patterns might be able to support. And some patterns drive themselves into self-consumption as soon as they begin. Some can spin out webs of forms and variations. Some patterns innately flow with speed, while others are fundamentally locked in near stasis. Hopefully you're following up to this point, because I know that this doesn't sound like the title of the story, but it really does. I want you to understand the highly subjective nature of pattern interpretation, even pattern discovery. And I want you to understand that most of the people around you with the most power, the ability to set forth chains of events that potentially, in very real ways, lead to guns in your face if you don't follow what they want. These folks are using these same appeals to pattern claiming to justify the draconian measures that they're proposing and that they're actually enacting right now, even as we speak. This is the backdrop for all of this. Evolution is the study of potential and past patterns of organic forms that, until recently, has been, by my subjective interpretation, plagued with meaning and design. And no, I don't mean from the intelligent design folks, but from within the labs of the staunchest atheists, who refer to the evolutionary process in terms of design. The bird wings have oil because it protects them from the water. The circumstances favored the continued increase of oil production to the point that its water protection was overshadowed by the weight on the bird. The former sentence, though crudely and plainly written for stylistic reasons, is nonetheless mostly how evolutionary scientists in their science books wrote and even talked about evolution. Now, the latter comes closer to capturing the current emerging spirit of the discipline, as it comes to understand more the nature of patterns in general and how such patterns, such structures, from the start, contain potentials and limitations. Random mutation is not the driver, but rather mutation, which I prefer to call deviation from the script, with a limited range of potentials. And at least in some instances, and in instances which I've actually covered on the site and on the show, evidence of rapid deviations from scripts that could otherwise that could offer significantly more variations of the same kind in a much shorter period of time than previously imagined. If the conditions are right, that you can have a vast variety of deviations from scripts find a way to live, then you would experience much more rapid variation. That organisms are constantly producing variations. And the problem, as far as the diverse expression of organisms, is that the vast majority of these variations may very well get you killed pretty quickly maybe even before you're born, or even shortly after you're born. Myself, for instance, I am an organism that has, from the start, been brought into the world under extremely physically limited circumstances. I am a deviation from the script, so to speak. First off, I was born with extremely crossed eyes. Extremely crossed eyes. And I was born a month premature in 1968. In 1968, they had the technology to make us viable, even though we were a physical alteration from the script that, without external circumstances protecting our extreme vulnerability, we most likely would have been left to die. So an organism that expresses something like me in a situation in which it has security and the capacity to take care of those that don't offer physical usefulness, so to speak, then variations like me have a chance and we live, and in other circumstances we don't. So where you have situations in which organisms have more capacity to in some sense take care of their deviations from the scripts that don't produce the capacity to fundamentally take care of themselves in a physical world, then you have more variations. And if you don't, then you don't. And in most instances, the conditions are such that there won't be very many variations because they won't live long enough to reproduce. So the nature of the new emerging discipline of evolutionary science should, I believe, be one that it would, should, I believe, one that it would do well to adopt for anyone. All right, what was I saying? Okay, the nature of the new emerging discipline of evolutionary science should, I believe, be one that it would do that. I know what I was trying to say. The nature of the emerging discipline of evolutionary science should, I believe, be something that one would do well to adopt for anyone seeking to understand the true nature of the reality of power in the land that you currently live in. And this is the key. This is my point. You study the patterns, not for the meaning of the patterns, not for an understanding of the agency involved. Not that the meaning and the agency aren't factors for you to consider, but they're not your end goal. They're not there. If you're looking to understand meaning, you're only looking to understand meaning in an effort to understand the pattern itself, for the predictability regarding what might potentially come. And when you, by the way, when you look for the predictability regarding what might potentially come, especially if you're not starting off with what you want to come, you are going to quickly discover. I know I do this for myself. I have so often said something like, man, so many people told me, and I'm like, wait a second. That's a pattern claim. Take an inventory. I do this literally. Take an inventory. Hardly ever when I say that sentence is it true. It's almost always not more than two people that becomes everyone. Everyone. Over and over again, I do this to myself. But because I'm looking for actual predictability to understand the world as it is, rather than create the world as I want it to be, that puts me in a position where I'm checking facts and figures instead of going along with the flow. And believe you me, Citadelians want you to go along with the flow. Pattern claiming is a powerful means of controlling the masses. Claim patterns of fear and terror and promise, vague promise of deliverance from fear and terror. And it's easy for people, especially people that for one reason or another are fundamentally unhappy with where they are now, with what is. It's easy for them to find the patterns and state with certainty and believe it with certainty. Listen, I've experienced what they're saying. I know exactly what they're saying. It's true. I've seen it with my own eyes. Everywhere I go, I see it all the time. You've seen it maybe 1 out of 100 times, but that one now becomes all, you know, what I've described above earlier, well, above in terms of looking at the article. And I think I'm going to end it there. Well, no. I mean, the whole point is actually to get to the excerpt, but actually the excerpt this is another one of the situations where the excerpt isn't nearly as important. The excerpt was the starting point, but I'll just read it briefly here for you. This is from Real Clear Science. Why evolution seems to have a direction. And this is the key. They're not saying that it has a direction. What they're saying is this is pattern. This is human beings pattern recognizing and imbuing meaning in patterns. As organisms evolve more complicated systems of development, they may, however, become less able to modify certain aspects of their anatomy. This is partly because genes, tissues, and organs often have several different functions, so it may become difficult to change one for the better without accidentally breaking something elsewhere. For example, nearly all mammals, from giraffes to humans, are stuck with just 7 neck bones. Whenever different numbers develop or evolve, they bring other anatomical problems. Birds are entirely different and seem to evolve new numbers of neck vertebrae with remarkable ease. Swans alone have between 20 and 25, but in general, while evolution produces new species, the flexibility of the body plans of those species may decrease with rising complexity. The body... and again, even in here, while evolution produces new species, well, I guess that's fine. The flexibility of the body plans of those species may decrease with rising complexity. Even this language here, this is still plan. There's no plans. There's no plans. These are emergent structures that you're looking at, and the emergent structures rise and fall according to the capacity of the individual to satisfy preference within the structure that they exist within. That's it. Clearly, there is an apparent contradiction at the heart of evolutionary biology. On one hand, the mechanism of evolution have no predisposition for change in any particular direction. On the other hand, let those mechanisms get going, and beyond some threshold, the interwoven ecological and developmental systems they generate tend to yield more and more species with greater maximum complexity. Yes, I think that's generally. I don't exactly understand. I can't tell you exactly why. I had a thought in my head about why that might be, and I quickly shot it down. So I don't know, but I do see, at least from what I understand, and I'm not a scientifical malologist person, but does seem to be pretty overwhelmingly true from what we see in the fossil record. We get our news from news aggregate sites that I personally curate. One of them is Obamacare.tv. And if you went to Obamacare.tv, you would see free market social engineering for the masses. Mortgage investors get good news as Fed keeps buying securities. Yay! And look at this. Live PD canceled by A&E a day after COPS gets dropped. Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft hit all-time highs with combined market value of about $5 trillion. And there you go. There you go. This is related to the story I said earlier about why you're seeing this push for breakups. The Treasury official is running the bailout. This Treasury official is running the bailout. It's been great for his family. Selective outrage from the left, by the way, because you're all doing it. You're all doing it. That's why that's why families want family members in power occasionally, just to make sure that they get their carve-outs and their advance notice for the legal insider trading. Expedia shareholders reject proposal to require greater disclosure of companies' political donations. Well, of course. I don't blame them. I mean, the people doing this aren't exactly doing anything but trying to socially shame wrongthink, so screw the people that are leading this charge, but screw these people too. U.S. producers in tears at having, well, screw none of you. Well, screw all of you politically and metaphorically, but I want to be your neighbor. Neighbor, I want to be all of your neighbors, and I think we can. And finally, U.S. producers in tears at having to cull livestock on their farms. Get your daily Freako updates at Freako.com daily. Just enter your email address and register for daily updates today. And also, don't forget to tip your Freako at tips.freako.com or freako.com/tips. Or you can go to freako.com and click the big yellow button and send Freako money. 2 promos at the end. You greedy pig. All right, and that is the halfway point for the show. So we're about ready to go on our little breakology here. Let's get ready here. Hey, stop that. Stop it. I didn't say, listen, I paid for this microphone. All right. There we go. All right. I got that. All righty. We're going to go on break now. I will be back in a little bit. Oh no, I didn't pause the Metropolis. That means, hold on, you get a little bit. I gotta go find the space where about right there we go. All right, we're gonna start it right here. We got our Metropolis in the background there. You know what? I don't think that you are correct in your assumption of sizing. I don't like this chain of events. See if we can get this to work out a little better. And we're down, and we're up a little, and we're bound. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Now we can go on break. I will see you about 4 minutes as I do the innie outie with the liquid exchange of the body. Y'all know how it is. Y'all know how it is.
Love overwhelmed me. Love overwhelmed me. Love overwhelmed me.
Warning, the material you're about to be exposed to is foreign to the minds of individuals who are limited in their capacity to understand the actual reality of power around them, just as you and everyone else alive currently are. What you're about to hear are opinions, suppositions, like gospel or scientific proofs, not infallible certainties. Brace yourself for incoming opinions that could confirm or deny your preferential view of the reality of power. Brace yourself for fallible material, fallible opinions, and values reflected, but nonetheless variably firmly held. We do not apologize to anyone we may offend. We do not apologize for daring to express our views and impressions of what we believe is and what we hope to see. We will keep talking so long as we are able.
And now, Frico attempts to talk about the news without freaking out.
That's the plan, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the news without freaking out. We have gone 2 shows in a row. We are halfway through this show, and I believe I'm going to be able to change that 2. I'm going to be able to change that. Hold on. Let me figure it out. There we go. I'm going to be able to change that 2 to a 3 by the end of this show, ladies and gentlemen. And days. I'm friendly to everyone, anyone and everyone, as long as you're willing to have some sort of coexistentiality with me that honors my bills of rights as surely as I will honor yours. Then we cool. Other than that, that's when I have a problem. And I don't even have a problem if you don't even like the bills of rights per se. I do have a problem if you intend on trying to violate them. Other than that, man, everyone's welcome. Left, right, conservative. I don't care. You love Donald Trump? Great. You love Hillary Clinton? Fine. Fantastic. I don't care. I believe that the vast majority of you don't realize that the only true thing left as far as American identity is really ultimately the only thing that really matters, especially in a pluralistic society, and that is it is our Bill of Rights constructs, and they are constructs, but they are useful constructs. And I believe especially they're useful in that I really do believe that the vast majority of human beings across a wide sphere of beliefs, when they're thinking about the tools at their disposal to defend them against tyrannicalness in general, they immediately appeal to the Bill of Rights, to I know my rights. Like the Constitution. It is essentially the Bill of Rights. That's really the only thing that really matters in the Constitution. Those 10 amendments. Those 10 amendments are the only thing that really matters. The only thing that you absolutely, if all government follows these bills of rights, if all businesses as well, that's the key. That's the big shift in my world, which is for the longest time I was a free marketeer with no fundamental understanding about the nature of markets and how in any state coercion system, the market and the state they're sort of one. I'm going to say they're not exactly one, but they're near enough one to one another that the ability of businesses to violate bills of rights of citizens is insane, given that they rely fundamentally upon the state to protect them from anyone seeking to break down the barriers of, I'm going to say, breaking down the barriers of competition. That's what I'll say. So the bills of rights, and I've said this many times in this show, the Bill of Rights is a nice starting point. I'd love to get us to a point where we would stand on our preferences instead. And I believe that 99.99+% of us lack the capacity to really be or do or adopt to anything other than a consensual exchange. This is what we should pursue because we're worthless pieces of human filth, garbage, that without other human beings' mercy, grace, and skills, we will fucking die. And we'll deserve to because we're pieces of shit. Now, I want everybody to get to that point. I want you all to understand what pieces of shit you all are. But then I want you to get to the next stage. This is the important one. Really, really significantly important. Everyone else is too. If everyone else is a piece of shit, guess what that means? That means we're all equal. No one has any right to assume that they have a superiority over another individual for any other reason other than they bested them in a level playing field. And if they didn't do that, then shut the fuck up. Value is subjective in the end anyway. But I believe that if you get rooted in what I'm saying here and you actualize that in your mind, you will come to realize the significance of consensuality in your universe, and this is a big part of the show. It's trying to convince people not only that consensuality is the way, but it is the way that offers a probably an infinite variation of ways. There are an infinite variety of ways for humans to govern themselves in consensual patterns. Infinite varieties, I am sure. What's fundamental to consensuality is simply power. It is the actual distribution of real power across all of the what I call the four spheres, or the four markets of influence. And the four markets of influence are demonstrable. Demonstrable. This is by perception. All this is perception. To the degree to which perception can counter reality, okay, great. At some point, perception can't, but demonstrable. There is social. That is the affirmation or denial by others, and then there is force. That it's the threat or direct application of force, physical alteration of your reality by another, and then finally there is the ideational. And these are the philosophies, the economic theories, the religions, the moral constructs, all the absolutarian methodologies of attempting to define the best human and the best humanity. Those things. That's the ideational. These are all, essentially, these are, from a combination of these things, the vehicles of power emerge that individuals adopt to satisfy their preferences. But they can never face that sense of just satisfying preference to be, as you could say, self-centered. So anyway, I'll speak more about this later. I just wanted to drop that in there, and I'll do that regularly in between scenes here. This was sort of planned, so this little deviation from our time is planned. We're about an hour in, and all right, let's get ready for the next segment. How about we do that? And we're going to begin recording this segment in 3, 2, 1. This is the talk feature with Frico Talks the News on Thursday, June 11th, 2020. My name is Frico with Frico.com, and today, I love this. I made this. I did this. I'm so happy with this. This is kind of an accident, and I'm happy how it turned out. Wait, let me read all this stuff first. I know my wife is listening. Amazon power triggers Musk's call for breakup. This is Elon Musk. Elon Musk versus Jeff Bezos. Amazon censorship. Amazon monopoly breakup. Breakup talk. Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a Citadelian wannabe. He's vying for entrance into the club. He's a nouveau Rishian. Now, I'm not sure what kind of power his family had or what he came from in South Africa, so I can't speak to that. But still, you're in America, son. So he's trying to get in. So there's that context for you to consider. And he's not doing anything that indicates he doesn't have the Citadelian mentality. He does imagine that he has the right and the right, quote unquote, right and the capacity to gather tremendous amounts of resources and bring them to bear in ways that allows him as an individual to make fundamental decisions that affect hundreds of millions of people. That's Just take that into mind. I think I'm not going to appeal to your morality. I'm going to appeal to your sense of consensuality and ask you how well that is in your head. Especially if you believe, as I believe, that no human being could possibly have the capacity to justify the certainty in their head to dare make such decisions for so many other human beings. That's my supposition. Elon Musk has found himself in the inadvertent champion of another breakup call echoing across the land that almost encounter to the blood and bones coronaville reality of even greater consolidations of wealth, resources, and power than there were before coronavilles, when breakup talks had already begun to enter mainstream discourse. He'd laid down the gauntlet on Amazon Inc. over its decision to remove a book on coronavirus because it didn't match the accepted orthodoxy of state and corporation. Yeah, this whole thing here, this whole part here, I love this. You know, I kind of let that, oh, that's nice. It's grayed out on here. That's nice. Love that. Okay. Because it didn't match the accepted orthodoxy. How many times these folks keep showing over and over and over and over and over and over that they don't know what the heckles they're talking about. You have had examples of YouTube clamping down on videos that claimed that the coronavirus came from China. You couldn't call it the Wuhan virus. You couldn't call it the China virus. You couldn't post videos that said that it came from China because that wasn't the accepted orthodoxy of the WHO. And then you had instances where you couldn't have videos where you said that you needed masks when they were telling people you didn't need masks because they didn't want a lot of people buying masks because they wanted the healthcare people to have the masks. There's so many times, and then they'll just reverse switch, and then suddenly the thing that was orthodox before is now unorthodox, and the orthodox is now this. This is literally, I think that I'm not the first to say this. I heard others say this, but I've thought this for a long time. We don't live in 1984. We live in a combination of a brave new world in 1984. Those are the two worlds that we live in. A brave new world, I guess I'll say the fundamental difference between a brave new world and well, the structure of how they control you in the brave new world versus 1984. 1984, it's just a rigid sterilization and homogenization of thought. And in a brave new world, it's more a concentration of thought through the pursuit of the hedonistic, if you will. It's a and I think that what they've managed to pull off is a combination of the two, where they've managed to sterilize the mind and also manipulate the mind using, well, you know what? Keep watching. If you're watching this segment, make sure that you look for the next segment that I'm going to cover, and I'm just going to tell you because it's definitely related to what we're talking about. A shock is all it takes to make rats love what their bodies naturally hate. That story is particularly relevant to the point that I'm making. Hint, you're the rat in the story. So am I. So the more these corpos push increasingly narrower standards of accepted orthodoxy onto their terms of service, the more they will require protection from the state when the consequences of their decisions to destroy other people's lives over toss violations with a partisan ideology built into the terms. Well, I don't think I finished the sentence there. When the consequences of their decisions to destroy other people's lives over toss violations with a partisan ideology built into the terms comes into effect. And that is the more action that you take that affects greater amounts of people, the more you increase the possibility that amongst those groups of people, you have individuals that maybe even before you did anything to them were already on the edge. So you increase your liability. And the more devastating your action, and the more widely felt your action, this is just the law of, these are just patterns, folks. These are real patterns, not artificial ones. These are real patterns. And you don't make these types of decisions that these folks make unless you fully believe that when somebody shows up at your door, and you know eventually somebody will, and they already have, the woman who showed up at YouTube's door, for instance. And in their case, that was a woman that fundamentally didn't want to kill anyone. And what didn't try to kill anyone, actually. That's not really covered, but she did kill herself. But so they were lucky with that one. But they rely on their understanding, their tacit understanding, that the state, the ones with the guns, the quote unquote legitimate guns, that they will protect them from the consequences of their actions. They would not do so otherwise. Nor would they do so if they felt that in so doing, that the individuals that they're destroying, that they wouldn't be destroyed, that they could easily go to another platform equally as viable as theirs. But they know that doesn't exist. And they know, because they shut the doors behind them, they know that it won't exist anytime in the near future. So they're protected from forced competition, and they are protected from market competition. When you have little cost of coercion, what do you know? You tend to be more coercive in nature. That's simply what you're seeing. This is simply the reality of power. This is when you see these things happen, you know immediately that there's a significant imbalance of real power going on here. And you figure out where the root of the imbalances of power are. I can already tell you what they are, but you keep watching. I'll tell you more about that. I've already told you in past episodes as well. In this case, they've chosen to adopt a particular moral supremacist ideological construct and to utilize their monopolistic power advantage over any potential agents of dissent from the particular current accepted worldviews and demonstrated actions to prop up the narratives that favor their constructs and destroy the narratives and the people that dare share the narratives that might expose the lie that all certainitarian, revengetarian, ideological constructs necessarily are. And I say this because, like I said earlier, and here I say, given humanity's incapacity to know with certainty even the most basic question about human governance. And this would be the fundamental question. If you were really trying to govern in a truly scientific way, as many of these people claim they are, scientific and humane and loving, then you'd want to know fundamentally, why do humans act? You tell me. Give me the answer. Why do humans act? Now, I believe my answer is not the root. I don't believe that I know. I think that my answer is far deeper than most of your answers. And I challenge you in the comments below. Go ahead and correct me and show me the error of my ways. I'm happy to be corrected. I want to know. I believe that the base of action, this is Action Batsa, the name of our YouTube channel here. The base of action is preference, such as deep as I can understand it now. There is something deeper than preference, and that is the biofeedback system within the body, the human body. There are great mysteries there as far as who's zooming whom, the degree to which you are, or the degree to which your parts of you that are outside of your knowing make you you. It's difficult. It's complicated, but that is more to the base of action than what I'm identifying right now, but it's as deep as I can get right now. And that is simply preference. Preference. And preference is the apex, the core preference for the probably 99.99999% of humans, whatever. And I believe that there are deviations from the script, so I can't account for that consideration. I have to account for that consideration. So I can't say with absolute certainty, but I'm almost certain that almost anyone that you put before me at some point will be able to get to the apex existential within them. That's the core preference. The core preference is to experience in the here and now the sensation of living out being the apex existential, and we all have different variations of the apex existential, and it fundamentally strides three planes of existentiality. And the first plane is the genetic, and it's not just physical genetic. So a lot of these things, they're all kind of interrelated. They all kind of interweave with one another. But basically, you can somewhat more or less break it down to you have the genetic, you have the physiological, and the ideational. And this is where you want to be in experience, a sense of is, was, and always will be at the highest level that you perceive that you could be in this, whatever your particular apex existential pursuits are. That's how I see the universe. And nobody even tries to understand it. They stop at freedom. They stop at liberty. They stop at equality and diversity. Like diversity is a morality. How is diversity a morality? Diversity is just a state of your overall structure. Does your structure have more diverse structures within it or not? It's not a morality, but they claim it as a morality in the name of diversity. Like that's a morality. It's not a morality, and that's it. Nobody is really trying to fully understand what's going on. They're trying to understand how to cram their vehicle of power, or what's going on, into their vehicle of power, even if it means in the end cutting themselves off from fundamentally understanding what's going on, because most human beings fundamentally don't want to understand what's going on. They want to understand, what can I do to put that in my vehicle of power and convert it in a way that I at least have plausible deniability when I murder my neighbors, because in the end I'm really just doing it because I want their yard. This is an excerpt from the Sun. And honestly, is another. The excerpt isn't as important to me as that part above. And usually, this is. I kind of ended up. This is a feature, but I ended up treating it like a dialectical. Elon Musk calls out and aimed Jeff Bezos over censorship of Coronaville lockdown book and says Amazon should be broken up. Elon Musk has called for Amazon to be broken up and dubbed the company's action as insane after the tech giant censored a journalist's book on the coronavirus. I'm still in coronavirus. I've decided I'm still in coronavirus for the foreseeable future. Former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson's tweeted that Amazon has refused to sell his book on its site as it did not comply with our guidelines. They censored it, he fumed. It is based entirely on published government data and scientific papers. It doesn't say coronavirus isn't real or doesn't kill people. In fact, the worst case death toll is likely to be striking to people. And Amazon won't run it. The Tesla founder backed Benson, saying the move was insane, tagging Jeff Bezos in his tweet. He then added, "Time to break up Amazon. Monopolies are wrong." No, they're not. I mean, within frameworks of preference, you can argue that they're wrong. I would say monopolies are not efficient if you prefer frameworks of preference. Although there could be circumstances where maybe monopolies have consensuality within them, but I think the chance of that is incredibly, incredibly remote. I get my stories from aggregates of news sites that are newslink sites that I myself curate. One of them is pioneeringnews.com, which is my favorite one. Tech, science, and underground news. If you go there today, you'll see simulations on biologically relevant timescales achieved. Scientists create embryo-like research model from human stem cells. Someone mysteriously paid $2.5 million to send $133 in cryptocurrency. Derpity derp. Tiny brain stim implant doesn't need batteries or wires. Army researchers set sights on self-regenerating armor. And the plutonium of artificial intelligence could be coming to a city near you. I tell you, I could do a whole show on these stories alone, and yet it would be maybe one of these stories, maybe two of these stories will show up in next week's later shows. Who knows? You got to pay attention. Don't forget to get your daily Freako updates at freako.com/daily. Just enter your email address and register for daily updates today. Oh, I didn't do this last transition thing, but you know what? That's all right. I'm okay with that in this situation. All right, let's get ready for the news poem here. I'm gonna turn off the microphone for a second here because I gotta take a swig of coffee. I'm sorry about that delay, folks. I was, while I was clearing my throat, all of a sudden I heard a very loud something above my head. And I had to pause for a second. I took my mic to listen, and I think my daughter is an unschooler, and so she's actually still finishing up because some of her projects, basically, the reason she's finishing up late is because she's working on making her projects more complex than she would need to for what would be considered her final projects, because we're working on trying to create, hopefully, an awesome transcript for her if she wants to go to college. I hope she ends up not going to college, but I want her to have the option. So she's finishing up. And she might be rustling around and drop something, who knows. But everything seems to be fine, so I think I can record the last segment of the show. And we're going to start recording that in 3, 2, 1. This is the news poem for Freako Talks the News on Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Today's news poem. A shock is all it takes to make rats love what their bodies naturally hate. And we're going to hear about amygdala excitation, Kent Barrage, and University of Michigan. And you know what? We're going to just do this in advance. Let's see where we got. Do we have... Let's make our transition here. Do we? Yep, we have our text thingy here. Let's just do this in advance because I think this definitely warrants this. I'm going to go ahead and call this for what it's worth. And we're going to get rid of this line here. We don't need this line. And we're going to create a space here, create a space there, couple spaces there, couple spaces there. Oh, we don't need that comma. This is all done just to prepare you for this show. And this is important. I know most of the time I'm not going to do stuff like this before I get to the topper, but I'm doing it this time. I really want this to be... There we go. Hold on. Let's get this a little bit symmetrical, sort of lined up. So we got our space. There we go. I think that is the key to this program. Amygdala excitation. Amygdala excitation. I don't even know if that's pronounced right, but it is to me. Researchers from the University of Michigan discovered that by activating the emotional response part of rat brains, they could drive rats towards targets that not only gave them no reward, but would actually cause them pain. I believe they have danced into the shadow of the apex existential assumption, the title of the YouTube channel I post the show to, Action Bazza, which in Latin means base of action. Preference being the base of action, preference driven by internal biochemical, bioelectrical, biomagnetic, and whatever other ways a core of who we are, creates the impulses for preference, the potential internal reward the body delivers to the mind, to put it into simplistic terms. They delivered through external manipulation the conditions for the majority of the heuristic institutional, and that's my phrase for the parts of us that compels us to reflexive action and assumptions. Reflexive action and also key assumptions. What you call presuppositions, so to speak. Well, literally, not so to speak. So these heuristic institutional signalers to convert to one message. Satisfy the signal. Satisfy the signal, 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 satisfy the signal. I think that's also really key. I'll tell you something. This is one of the dilemmas that the nation state has in general with social media. It has this inherent capacity to enable individuals to find one another in ways that would not be advantageous to the state. You don't really want people to be able to compare notes too much, because states always have to declare rightness and truth and moral awesome, and yes, we're winning and working, and yes, they're really evil, and none of it's true. Well, there's always a measure of almost always a measure of truth, but on the main, very little of it's true. But yet, at the same hand, the capacity for a regulated, controlled, and it's very difficult to fully control it, but a regulated, controlled social media to deliver amygdala excitation, satisfy the signal. Satisfy the signal. This is all they got to do. All they got to do. The signal sent from outside the body, but one which yet enabled the signal to direct the action of the individual, even against its own interests. And that's key. Against its own interests. But that's even there and of itself. It's not. It didn't act in its own interest. It acted within the framework of its understanding of the reality of the universe. It acted in its own interests. It acted to satisfy preference. Now, in this case, the preference was externally created. Welcome to social media and mass media manipulation in general, but in lab form, concentrated form. All right, I'm going to take this down now. I think you got the point there. News first, poem follows. So this is from futurity.org. Brain circuitry can create desire for stuff that hurts. Stimulate, and by the way, I do love that title. Great title. Futurity.org, whoever wrote that title. Thumbs up from Frico. Frico approves. Stimulating the brain circuitry related to addiction can create strong desires even for something that hurts, according to a new study with rats. The researchers used a laser to excite neurons in rats' amygdala, a brain region that generates emotional responses, to create intense desires focused on particular targets. These targets for different rats were either sugar, cocaine, or even an object painful to touch, each paired with brief amygdala excitation. That's that phrase right there. Amygdala excitation, amygdala excitation, amygdala excitation. Somebody write that song and send it to me. Comment down below if that's true. The addictive type desire was equally strong whether the target was liked or disliked, the researchers found. The pain target group of rats had amygdala laser excitations paired with voluntary encounters of an object that gave an electric shock whenever touched, an immobile rod sticking out of a wall. After a number of brain activation and shock pairings, those rats came to compulsively seek out the electrified rod, climbing over a barrier to reach and touch it repeatedly and subject themselves to shocks repeatedly, because the shocks were overridden by the reward that the body was sending them for the success. They were apex existential, and as a matter of fact, maybe, just maybe, the shocks were even more legitimization of the awesomeness of what they are overcoming to satisfy this urgent preference from within. So they're satisfying preference. They're not no one acts in their best interest. No, everyone acts in their best interest. Well, I can't say that absolutely, because you know how I feel about absolutes. But everyone acts in their best interest. Now, the question is an informed consent decision, and more often than not, it's not. In their case, it's not. There was something from outside that reached within without their consent, in their case, and converted their internal reward system into a way to satisfy the preference of those outside of it. Those that wish to see them satisfy preference in this way because it served their use. In this case, the Citadelians in the story are the researchers, the ones willing to watch life be torn apart mentally, viciously, so that they can understand. And I'm not judging them morally. I'm saying that is, we would consider it pretty, it is vicious, and you know what, vicious is a moral construct. I won't say that. I'll say mentally, and I will say in significantly, most likely, mentally debilitating ways afterwards. I'm sure that these rats after this, that there's going to be recurring issues with these rats for the rest of their lives, for however long that is. And it's different when it's humans. And yes, it is. You know why it's different when it's humans? It's because I'm a human. And I find that in my... Now, don't get me wrong, I find consensual motivation for the concern of animal well-being and animal agency to a certain degree. But on the main, I'm significantly more bothered by Citadelians that do this to human rats as opposed to Citadelians, metaphorical Citadelians, that do this to literally rats. A different group of rats, choosing between sugar and cocaine, seemed addicted to sugar after amygdala laser activations were paired with earning sugar. Those rats single-mindedly pursued sugar and ignored the chance to earn intravenous cocaine. Dang. I would ignore it too, because my body does not like. My body is naturally always, it's kind of naturally speeding as it is. I did coke, I did speed, and I gotta say I was never all that into either one of them, because they took me into much higher levels than they took most people. That was a diversion that didn't need to be there. Our third group, given the same sugar cocaine choice, seemed addicted to cocaine, and they put that in quotes, after their amygdala laser activation was paired with earning cocaine. Those rats pursued only cocaine while ignoring sugar. Amygdala laser activations by themselves were not particularly rewarding and could even increase fear in some other situations. Well, they were. You don't understand how they were rewarding. They were rewarding in that what you were doing is you were overriding the circuits to point all of the heuristic institutional whatevers to begin to process the body towards a satisfaction of the pursuit of that externally stimulated preference. And winning and experiencing happiness. Happiness is basically when the body gives you at the state of the aware and often pervasively physiological, biochemical, electromagno, whatever combinations we reward ourselves with, that says, yes, you are awesome. That's happiness. The amygdala activation had to be combined with the sugar cocaine shock target in order to create the strong desires the study shows. In each desire group, the amygdala recruited additional addiction-related brain circuitry to create a strong and narrowly focused wanting for its paired target, whether the target itself was pleasant or painful, said Kent Berridge. See, there's Kent Berridge. Told you he was coming. A professor of psychology at the University of Michigan. Told you that was coming too. If you watched at the beginning of the show, you're probably waiting for those. Came at the very end. And now let's get to the... Let's see. Do we have it here? Yes, I do. Let's get to the news poem part of the show. I'm going to pick this screen for this particular one. I think it's appropriate. Amygdala broke the lamp, but she satisfied the shock. Fear is the shock of sugar, invading the agency of the agent. Become amygdala, the swagger. Genetic force punched into the entropic nature of satisfaction. In a loop, I didn't know. It was the excess. The brain flowed out of the needle. It took the rat to the cube of sugar that would kill it. Eventually. But cash, dollar, dollar. That sweet wind chime jingle of the flow. We bought 100 sugar cubes and settled in for a night of death by overdose. And we liked it. We liked it. Not against my will. Cooperation. Do you want the sugar after the shock? Hells yes. And the rats were happy, friends. Happy. Constant satisfaction of the great I am within trickled, maneuvered into satisfaction of all that is through the success, once again of the consumption, never mind the cost or the taste. You get this scene? The dolly sweeps the camera into a new view. You sit there in the middle, tapping on the screen. I will remember the fallen, and I will heal the land with love. Love. Dissection. The will is in the shock, not the action. But then again, the rats, well, they were happy. And their grandest of grandest dreams were constantly satisfied with little effort and only the cost to some of physical life. A small price to pay for satisfying the shock that the experts administer for the good of the knowing of how to make a soul your own, with merely but a shock to the proper peace of mind in your skull. Don't forget to tip your Frico at tips.frico.com. And here's some of the links that did not, in the end, these were the ones that really came the closest to make it in the show and did not make it in the show. And these are just recent links. These free tools blur protesters' faces and remove photo metadata. If insurers want to flex their pro-climate muscle, they should lobby lawmakers and reconsider where they advertise. Turkey uses Libya for its Mediterranean expansion vision, but it could backfire. Our headlines links. Philly Police Inspector John Bologna applauded by fellow officers as he surrenders on charges of assaulting a protester. I think I read a lot of these already. All right. Well, okay, so some of these I actually read. Oh, okay. Aurora James is calling on the retail industry to take the 15% pledge. Psilocybe mushrooms may subdue brain's alter ego center, and the economics of AI, why scalability isn't simply a matter of more use cases. And that's the end of this segment. Get your daily Frico updates at frico.com/daily. Just enter your email address and register for daily updates. Do it. Do it now. Alrighty then. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for joining me on Frico Talks the News. I will be back tomorrow. I think I'm settling in. We're going to be a 10 a.m. show, and one of the key reasons, but I would really love to do the show early in the morning, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., but because of what happened Monday, I do not want to face a situation where I have if I have a technical problem. I'm going through a process now where I'm actually setting up to run the show as if I'm going on early in the morning, and then if I have a technical problem, and I have more than enough time to fix it before I go live. So that's why I'm going to do the show at 10 a.m. to give myself time if I have any kind of technical issue to still. I want to make sure that I'm on when and where I say I'm going to be. So and I can't guarantee that, but I want to get as close to 100% as possibly. So that's why the show is going to be 10 a.m. from now on. So I thank you all for joining me. I'm about ready to head on out into the trail. I'll see you guys all tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is the wrong window. That is TikTok made a medical drama, and it's remarkably bad. Oh, I gotta go back and watch that. The Deaf Noodles. Mr. Bunny Ears. Oh, yeah. I by the way, I run a website, tubefire.tv, and that's I follow a lot of insane YouTube channels, and I put them in. Well, go to tubefire.tv, you'll see how they show up. I don't really use that site for this project. It's just something that I do kind of for myself, for reasons. Just to kind of keep, in the end, even if the videos themselves are deleted, I still have an archive that they existed. And I'm kind of keeping, I archive my sites, and I'm just, it's the historian in me. I'm trying to keep documented certain things. Anyway, go to tubefire.tv and check out the stuff that's on the front of that site. With that, I'm going to end the show. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I haven't even written the show yet, so I don't even know what it's about. I picked the stories, but I didn't dive super deep into them yet. I will now. I'll do that right after the show, right after I post the videos. Good night.
Thank you for engaging with this material presented. As usual, remember your views, your suppositions do not make you subhuman, nor do they permit you to subhumanize others. No humans were harmed in the making of the show, and we extend no wish of harm in anyone who hasn't directly harmed or threatened to harm others first, no matter how reprehensible we find your views.
We will see you in the next Frico Talks, where Frico attempts to talk about news without freaking out.